Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and today I am joined by the great Dr. Ron Paul, who needs no introduction, former congressman, presidential candidate, somebody who inspired millions of people, including myself. Dr. Paul, I have my copy of Revolution, a Manifesto right here on my bookshelf. The first time we met was in 2010 at the University of Houston when you were speaking there, and that was about a year after I had started to wake up, as we like to put it, so to speak, to government corruption and really the true nature of our world. And I can say for sure that the End the Fed movement that you were largely responsible for, and your books and getting to hear you speak, really helped me move into the direction of libertarianism, to discover voluntarism, to discover agorism, and really it's shaped all of my work. So I just want to say thank you very much for everything that you've done over the years.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so the first thing I want to talk about, I do want to talk to you today about the Trump administration and DOGE and some of those sort of things, but I'd like to get into maybe a bit of history first. And just, I'm curious your thoughts on the current state of the libertarian movement, perhaps compared to back in the 70s or the 80s. From what I've heard and read, that you were an ally and associate of Murray Rothbard until his death. Could you speak to that a little bit, your thoughts on how the movement has changed? Obviously, there's many more libertarians, but do you think there's any major differences in terms of reaching people?
Yes, I think there's been a big change. I remember going to Congress, which I considered a bit of a fluke. It was a special election. And when I started out, it was mainly to talk about the issues, in particular the monetary issue, because that was after Nixon had closed the gold window. And in 1971, I said, boy, this is a big deal. And it has turned out to be a big deal. Back then, gold was $35 an ounce, and now it's over $2,000 an ounce. So it is a big deal. So that motivated me to read more and more, although I was exposed to Austrian economics in the early, late 60s, early 80s, and there were many predictions made by, it wasn't so much an organizational libertarianism, and it was people getting together, but it was through the economic policy. And it's true, I knew Murray Rothbard and read all of Mises, heard him lecture, and that excited me. And that's when I, after the Nixon pulled his stuff, I started talking out, and lo and behold, there was a good reception out there. There were more people than I thought, and it's been that way all along. Even though at times, prior to this election, most people would say, "Where are you guys? We don't hear from you." But maybe we're starting to, realize that there is libertarianism is existing, that people talk about it more so. But I remember that first week or two, I was in the Congress. It was a special election. I won, so I was more noticeable because I was the only one that was new to the Congress. And that, when I started voting, it sort of dumbfounded some of the liberals would come over. I might be voting all of a sudden with the liberals on something, because there was a faction of the Democrats that were better. The progressives were a little bit better on foreign policy at the time. So I'd be voting, and they just couldn't figure it out, and it might be just in a passing comment. And but a few of them figured it out. I don't think it's quite like that now, because I think there's a faction of, they say, the Republican Party, that they have to at least address it. They don't control things, but they have an influence, and I think a person like Trump is aware of it, and his language might change, his positions might change, but it's not like it's the revolution has already occurred. But philosophically, it has to a degree, and I think that's all good, because I think a lot more people think along these lines. And I happen to think when people are offered our views on liberty versus the authoritarian views, I think if people didn't have a label like Democrat or Republican, I think most people want to be free, and they accept these ideas. So, but I don't think it's a political contest as much as it is a philosophic contest. And I think ideas are so important. That's why I was fascinated with getting involved. And back then it was Leonard Reed who helped me along a lot, because he had the Foundation for Economic Education, and he was a friend of Mises, and and he's spreading information. That was his main goal. So that was occurring, but I still think we're seeing, tremendous growth in there. And I'm an optimist in that regard, in spite of all the dumb things we as a country still do and how much what we have to put up to. But I think overall, we're moving in the direction. And my one goal is I anticipate that the Marxists are right, cause chaos in the cities, and then everybody will demand a revolution and something. Then they'll have this opportunity to usher in socialism. And we should be concerned about that. But why not if there's proof, and like this last election, there was proof that things were really bad, and there was a big change in the politics of it, but it wasn't pure libertarianism, but it was certainly a lot better than Marxism, even though we still see and complain about the cultural Marxism. They're around and they're still there, but to me, it's all an issue of ideas.
Sure, I definitely agree. This is an ideological battle. I just one other question about libertarian history before we maybe move into your political career. Were you aware of, or did you know, or ever meet or interact with Samuel Konkin within the Libertarian Party? He's the founder of Agorism. He wrote the New Libertarian Manifesto, and him and Rothbard had some contentious back and forth, but I think also some friendly relations. Did you ever interact with him at all?
Well, I heard the word Rothbard, but who was the other person you were bringing up?
Samuel Konkin, Samuel Edward Konkin III, sometimes just known as Sam Konkin. And his book was the New Libertarian Manifesto, published in the late 70s. And he
for some reason, it doesn't ring much of a bell, just vaguely. So I really can't comment on that.
No worries. I was just curious. Well, let's talk a bit about your history before we get into the current politics. A few things that come to mind, and I did ask my audience what they would like to hear from you, and there's a lot of questions people have besides giving thanks to you. One of them that comes up is the obvious influence today, and I think this is not just today, but in the past, of the Israeli nation, of the Zionist lobby. Clearly, anybody who pays attention to American politics and politics around the world can see that there is a pushback for people who speak against Israel in different ways and get accused of being anti-Semitic and things of that sort. Is that something that you ever experienced when you were in office? Like, were you ever pressured in any way to support Israel or to support their wars and causes?
No, but I knew it existed because that first month I was in Congress, that would be in 1976. There was I don't know the name of the magazine, but it was a magazine in Texas, probably still around, Texas Monthly or something like that, but I don't recall. And they had an article about me, the new congressman, and they had pictures. I think there was a swastika next to it, and that sort of thing. There was a lot of that antagonism. But yes, I was quizzed about it, but I think I staked out a position where it didn't matter. If somebody was coming in and lobbying, the lobbyists didn't come in, and even the people trying to get me to change and vote for money for Israel or something like that. I said, I just treat everybody the same way. We should treat, why don't we treat people the same way, and whose side they're on? Just don't send them our money. And if you want to do it, it's your money. You can send your own money, but I'm not going to vote to take the money and say, well, we're going to have to pick sides in the Middle East or pick sides in Ukraine, although we might have sides and we might use them for the arguments of why we shouldn't pick it. We can get very much involved, but that's the way it would be in the Middle East all along. There's always going to be factions. But I think, they talk about America first. Well, it's a good term and a lot of good comes from it, but really it's pretty superficial because America first, I think of individual liberty first. People should be free and have everything voluntary, all things voluntary, no force and no violence. And that to me would answer a lot of our questions. But right now there's too much authoritarianism, too much government dictates.
I agree. And we have to be weary of authoritarianism coming from the left and the right. So I appreciate your non-interventionist policy across the board. Another question regarding your political career. In the past, there have been, you have been asked about, I think it was probably in the 2012 presidential campaign, asked your thoughts on 9/11 and whether or not you had questions about 9/11 or if you support calls for a new investigation into 9/11. We're now 20 plus years past that event, and there have been, you have organizations like the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth and firefighters who've spoken out. Do you think now that you're out of politics, and I think you've probably had more time to look at the issue, do you think there is something to questioning 9/11, that this is something libertarians and freedom-minded people should support?
Yeah, there should be questioned. There should have been an investigation. There was one, but I'm very down on these investigations when they have a commission set up to find the truth. And most of the time, all those commissions, whether it had to do with 9/11 or the Kennedy assassination, all these commissions are set up either to cover up stupidity and mistakes or cover up the evil because we were involved in doing it. And so I don't have much confidence in the commission. I probably would have hard time voting against an investigation, hoping that you'd have some good people finding out the truth. But I think it's something that people should know about. But I think things have been investigated, and you cited a few things people are getting to know about. And the Kennedy assassination, just think of many books have been written on that. But it's late, but it's recorded there. And of course, I wrote a little booklet calling that, the data that the surreptitious coup in this country is what happened, the assassinations in the 60s and, the undermining of the Department of Justice and the FBI and the CIA and all that. So I think it's there, but commissions don't seem to be very good. It's sort of like they say, are you going to vote against waste, fraud, and abuse to cut down the spending? Yeah, I did because I had to have periodic votes to be against waste and fraud and abuse. So, but the thing of it is, it never does any good. I'm just hoping that the current commission does a little bit better job, because I don't think it's waste and fraud that is the big picture. All governments are wasteful and fraudulent. It's the idea that you put too much power into the government. That's where the trouble is. So if you say, well, okay, somebody wants $100 billion and somebody else says we should have 50, they settle on 75, but it should be, why are we doing it at all? Because the cuts never occur, and they don't, or they last for a short period of time. So I think that's a big problem. But I support the principle, doing what you can to stop the waste, fraud, and abuse. But quite frankly, that isn't the answer. You got to get rid of the public support for all this monstrosity, and of course for the foreign policy. We have to have a consensus that our foreign policy is bankrupting us. We're in big trouble, and the most sacred budget is the the military budget. It's the coalition. Used to be that when I first went to Congress in the 70s, early 80s, if we got 5 or 10 people to vote against some of that spending, that was a lot of people. Now they're fighting, and now there was a real debate over, should we keep sending money to Ukraine? So that I think is good. Debate has shifted, but it's the commissions are good only because you might get some information, but you got. I like to look at the big picture.
Overall, government's not the answer, though, and the government's not going to reveal the truth. So one other question before we talk about the incoming Trump administration and the Department of Government Efficiency. You've been a longtime advocate for gold. I mentioned the End the Fed movement earlier. And I've heard you mention a few times, your thoughts on Bitcoin. I'm curious because my reporting, along with Whitney Webb and others, we've been exposing how the Bitcoin community has been hijacked. There's a great book by Roger Ver called Hijacking Bitcoin that shows over the last 7 or 8 years, some very nefarious players have gotten into the Bitcoin industry, and we believe have co-opted it and are taking it towards something closer to a CBDC, something that can be tracked and traced. And so there's a lot of people who are now skeptical of Bitcoin and its potential to liberate humanity. But there are other privacy coins like Monero. Are you familiar with Monero at all? And do you have any thoughts on generally like using
No, I
private coins?
just the concept of the cryptocurrency, and mainly in talking about Bitcoin, assuming that gives you a hint on what's going on. But it's interesting that I get a lot of credit, for ushering in Bitcoin, and I go to the conferences, and most people who are involved in buying Bitcoin, are very grateful for what I contributed. But it's a little bit ironic because I'm very reserved in doing it. But my philosophy, sort of allowed the permission to have competing currencies. I said, just open it up. Let's have a competing currency, keep the government out. And, the proposal of Bitcoin and others, that's exactly what it was. But I think you're might be referring to it has morphed into something else. I mean, I can remember going to one conference and they had somebody that had worked as a person in the Congress dealing with legislation and legislative aid, and the person was to be the expert in advising the Bitcoin people what kind of laws we should pass. Well, I thought, well, it might be well intentioned, but that's not.
It's lost its way for sure.
That's not good. So, but right now, I'm fascinated with thinking about it because. I want freedom. I want freedom of choice, and maybe there is something to it. I personally have questions about the authenticity of it being real money because there's the definition of sound metal currency. It just doesn't even come close. But I'm also fascinated that when people talk about Bitcoin, they always show a gold coin, in magazines before Bitcoin's gone. And so that's, I find it very interesting, but I'm very reluctant that I think it's sort of interesting that I argued the case for why we should have it and it should be permitted and the government shouldn't be involved. At the same time, I don't rubber stamp what they're doing because some of the proposals now are a little bit bizarre that you sell some of your gold and take money out of manipulating gold and buy Bitcoin, put the Bitcoin in the bank and hold it forever. And it's going to go up so high in value. You can pay off all the national debt and it'll be a magic tool because it's 100,000 now, but soon it's going to be $1 million and we'll be able to save the world. And some of that is grandiose. Some of that is grandiose.
Yeah, absolutely. People should be skeptical. Well, I encourage you, Dr. Paul, to look into Monero. It's the call letters are XMR because it is a more private crypto, and it's one that actually the U.S. government seems to be
I've read a little bit about that, and they talk about gold also, don't they? On that. Yeah.
Well, there's many of us who believe that, like you said, competing currencies are necessary. So I tend to be, I'm not a maximalist. I have gold, I have silver, I have some Monero, I hold seeds. I think that we should diversify in that sense, but I appreciate your thoughts on that. Let's switch gears here now and talk about the incoming Trump administration. We are 4 days away from the inauguration as we're recording this. And there's a few questions that come up. The first one that I think many people, including myself, are curious about is whether or not you actually endorsed Donald Trump in the 2024 election. I know you said some favorable things as well as, pointing out some concerns, but did you ever officially, I guess, as far as that might go, endorse Trump in this election? Or?
No, I did not endorse him. And it's interesting. The last big rally, I think, was the one where he was shot. Was in Pennsylvania, and it was winding down. On the primaries, and they called me and asked me to come up to Pennsylvania at the last minute. Because they knew they were in it. This to me was a positive that the libertarians don't run things, but there's a significant number of libertarians around. So they wanted me to come up because I was not bashing Trump. And they wanted me to come up and and just be there. Then at the end, I said, nah, I don't fly on commercial airplanes and all this. They said, well, we'll get you a plane, we'll get you up there. But then somebody who was a staffer that knew me was sort of in the middle of this. They said, the whole thing is they expect you to give a rousing speech and endorse Trump. And I said, well, I'm not thinking about doing that. I'm trying to get away from, the partisan stuff. I want to stick with the philosophic place. I get criticized sometimes because I don't get into those fights and being precise. But I do talk about people. I talk about their policies. One comment I had that I sort of thought fit my philosophy because it was done subconsciously. It was at one of our big rallies. When we'd have those romp conferences when the Republican parties was having their big one, and we'd have big crowds out, and at one time I talked for an hour or so, and afterwards somebody from the press came up and said, "You talked for an hour or so." And this must have been when Romney was running, and he was the candidate, he was the competition, so to speak. So he said, and I guess Biden was president. They say, well, you talk for an hour and a half. You never mentioned Biden's name. You never mentioned Romney's name. And it's true. I'm not interested in that, but I'm interested in, what they stand for, what they did and how they do it. And I just don't enjoy personalizing it, but that doesn't mean that I'm able never to mention somebody's name, because especially when there's a key indicator, where does this idea come from? We on the Liberty Report try, in a diplomatic fashion, because people do want to know. They like the names associated to it. So that's something. But that's way down on my list. To me, it's I'd much rather talk about the difference between what happened when gold was money and the dollar was backed by gold, to the point when, 1971 was a big thing, when they got rid of gold completely related to the dollar. And look at what's happened since that year. And things are going to get much worse as far as I'm concerned.
I can say, Dr. Paul, from me, somebody who began my journey because of you, and I think many other libertarians, we were grateful that you didn't endorse Trump and that you do stick with the ideas and the philosophy. I think that's a better strategy. Now let's talk about the Department of Government Efficiency. There was a tweet back and forth between you and Elon Musk where they, said, "Hey, we would love to have you advising us." And I watched your show afterwards, and you said, like you said here today, you're not interested in getting involved in politics necessarily, but if people want your advice, you're happy to give it. Could you speak to what your role is or will be in DOGE? Is there anything specific that you've been offered by the Trump administration, or is it simply, they might come to you if they have a question? Is there anything official going on there?
No, not really. And I think it's an indication that there are people that aren't hardcore Republicans that are more libertarian than Republican. So they have been very kind in, saying decent things, because I never voted for any spending in all those years. I bet I voted against more spending than anybody else ever did in the Congress, because I never voted for a budget bill. So they wanted that association. So it's something that it's unofficial. I don't want if somebody would have offered me an official position, and especially if they offered me to be paid for that and become an agency of government, I would not touch that. I thought I was pretty comfortable, because they helped build up my credibility, and they would say positive things. Musk did that, and I think they helped me build our group of people who like to talk about this. So, but it's very unofficial. And I think the last words was, when they mention about being an advisor and that sort of thing, then we'll get back with you. And that's sort of where it stands. And heck, they're not even in an office yet. So I think, but it gave me an opportunity to have to have a much bigger audience. I was amazed at how many people look at some of the stuff on the internet, and it's been,
Sure.
I think that's it. Ideas can't be stopped. And I sort of think that I'm participating in the spreading of ideas. And I thought, boy, modern technology. I have some complaints about, computers and automatic stuff and all this. But I'll tell you what, it is a great tool when you can think how many people you can reach. Somebody say, well, that was over 1 million people looked at that. And I say, well, they made a mistake. I don't know who's going to look at something I said overnight, 1 million people. It's amazing. So I keep thinking about the interesting thing that ideas cannot be stopped. The military can't stop it. It's rough and tumble. But I think that eventually, especially because a lot of people would say, you did say something about this war coming. Daniel and I have talked a whole lot since 2014 about the disaster that we participated in NATO going into Ukraine, but every day now you still hear Russia invaded Ukraine and caused all this trouble. So there's a lot of work to do.
There's definitely a lot of work to do, and I appreciate you elaborate on that. I know I've only got you for a few more minutes, so I do want to ask a few important questions. So to elaborate on DOGE, Dr. Paul, I am one of the libertarians. I'm not a leftist, I'm a libertarian who is very critical of Elon Musk, and not because he's rich or because a billionaire. I don't hate people just because they have money, like maybe some people who are leftists. But namely, I think specifically from a libertarian perspective, I'm going to show you an article I wrote just a couple of weeks ago, which actually relates to another conversation you had with Elon Musk. When your show went out, when you had an internet outage, I saw that Elon Musk said, hey, you should get Starlink, and that'll help make sure you don't have any internet outages. And so that conversation that you guys had on Twitter was sort of the inspiration for this article I wrote here. And I started to look into SpaceX, and I'm not sure if you're aware, but Elon Musk's SpaceX, along with Starlink, they have a $1.8 billion classified contract with the National Reconnaissance Office, which, as you know, deals with all the satellites around the world. And every time Elon Musk is launching one of his rockets, he's also sending out classified satellites for the US military. They are aiming to put hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of satellites around the world. And to me, this is just one example of how Elon Musk, most, if not all of his wealth, is completely dependent on government contracts or corporate welfare, as I would put it, whether it's Starlink, Tesla with subsidies from the government, the space shield thing here. We could go on in numerous examples. And he is, connected with some, I think, people who their ideology is what we would call technocracy, that they believe that technocrats rule by experts, rule by the technicians. And so I'm curious your thoughts on that. How should us as libertarians, especially those who are inspired by you, look at Elon Musk and his relationship with the military industrial complex and his relationship with government in general?
Well, my position is he shouldn't get 1 cent from the government because it's stolen money from the people. So it's very easy, but it's also a mixed deal. I mean, when did it start? I mean, this thing on automobile, the subsidies he gets there. But somebody asked him about that. He says, I'd get rid of those things. I don't need them. I probably would make more money if I didn't do it. So it wasn't like he was going to defend it. He knew about it, but no, it shouldn't be done that way. When I think people need to understand what they're frightened about. You say, well, we need to get rid of Social Security and Medicare and all these things. Oh, yeah, and let all the people in the street starve to death and die without medical care and all that. Well, I think the fault is with us who believe in limited government and voluntarism, is we're not doing a good enough job, because the answer is that look at the results. Look at California. That's what you get. And that's why if you look at, I think it's a good example of the states that have been handled COVID a lot better than say California or these other states. So I think we have to show that liberty is the answer, and that they can't get away with putting us all on a guilt trip, because they should be put on a guilt trip. And you don't even have to do it with personalities and just say, oh, you're a thief or something like that. But it's all done by stolen money. So of course, if I had been Washington, if you're looking for somebody who wants to be in Congress or someplace and as libertarian, they should answer that question. But it is awfully messy when it gets so big, because I think the real philosophic enemy is that gets sort of the neutral position is corporatism. The corporation mixing it up with government. And I can remember the first race I ran. It's in '76. One of the top well-known business people in Houston, very wealthy person, came to like a little fundraiser. And as we were walking out the door, he already knew what I was up about, because he came over and probably made a donation. And he said, just remember, government and business is a good. We have to be partners with government and big business. But he was doing even smaller government locally, and which is not quite as atrocious as going from the federal government just printing the money. So no, I think my staff knew exactly what to do if they heard about legislation, thousands of pages, hundreds of pages, and all this stuff they sent. And I said, what I'm looking for is how much of it can be justified under the Constitution. And other staffers used to talk to my staff and say, "Boy, your job is easy. you practically, the joke is you look at the title and assume they're going to do exactly the opposite, and that isn't easy to vote against it." So there weren't very many things I could get excited about voting for.
I know you have to go in just a minute. One final question for you. I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for it. The final question I have relates again to the Trump administration and to, besides Elon Musk, we are seeing other technocrats who have extreme influence in the incoming administration, from J.D. Vance to Ken Howry to Jim O'Neill and several other people. They are all connected to Peter Thiel. And of course, Peter Thiel is a steering committee member of the Bilderberg Group. He is co-founder of Palantir, which is a private surveillance firm. I know that Peter Thiel at one point called himself a libertarian, and he even donated to your campaign a decade ago. And so I'm just curious on your thoughts on that. Do you think Peter Thiel was a libertarian when he was supporting you, or was he trying to gain influence over you? Did he ever try to seek favors over you? And what do you think about his role and his influence in the incoming Trump administration?
Well, I don't know. I've never met him, and I don't know why he actually did it. But my guess would be, since he was not in the, not as many people knew him back then as now, and I think he had libertarian leanings, and he must have liked what I was saying. Who knows? It might have been one particular issue. Maybe it's civil liberties, and maybe it was the war issue. I don't know. But a lot of times people who have mixed ideas, they will pick up some things. So what I do is I take that as good. If there's one issue that I can reach them, I would work on trying to show them that if you want less government there, it should be less government elsewhere, and do our best. I have no idea. But he's very much involved in all of that. I was surprised when somebody told me he gave the money. I had no idea, exactly why. If I'd have been a little more aggressive, maybe I could have called him up and said, "Can you send me more money? I need it for my foundation." But I don't usually do that.
You have any thoughts on his influence within the Trump campaign, or the idea that somebody from the Bilderberg Group, which many of us do see as representing maybe the hidden ruling class or the deep state, and he has so many people in Trump's administration, including Trump's VP?
Well, I wouldn't name one outfit, Bilderbergers or representative. I think of a broader opposition, and I probably lump them together as the deep state, all the people who have influence. I don't think it's a monolith. I don't think there's 12 or 15 or 75 people that can get together and agree on what their plan is. I think it's an overall philosophy that they've been exposed to. And I think the one thing that unifies them and brings people together in the deep state as well as us in the opposition is that people have been influenced by government schools. That's one of the reasons why I have homeschooling program. It's the government schools, and I met very few people in Congress that had any understanding. Like I said, the very first week, people said, they were dumbfounded. Why are you voting? Like it was the strangest thing in the world that you ended up voting with a honest progressive Democrat for the right reason. So it's about what Thiel does. I don't know. I don't know exactly what motivates him, but all I know is that he probably has one special thing that he liked, and I think that's great. I always see that. Let's say it's one issue that people like. I think it's opening up the door, and I keep blaming all of us in the libertarian movement that we don't do a good enough job to sell our message, and I think that is what I concentrate on, how to improve the message where more people would, open up their minds to it. And that's why I was really pretty shocked, pleasantly so, that so many young people from colleges, including Berkeley College, university, all the people that came out, and they seemed to like the idea of liberty. But I wasn't talking about republicanism or a Republican president or anything like that. So I think ideas, and I used to close, freedom is popular. Let's go out and spread the message.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul, for being a champion of liberty, for inspiring me and millions of other people. And we will continue the legacy on long after you're gone, and hopefully it will continue to be popular. So thank you for your time, Dr. Paul. I appreciate it, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.
Derrick, great being with you.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. You just heard my interview with Dr. Ron Paul, who, as I said, was a big inspiration of mine. I started waking up in Houston, Texas in late 2009. And 2010, I discovered Alex Jones, who has since sold out. I discovered Jim Marrs, who has since passed away. And I found Ron Paul through Revolution Manifesto and through my friends in the End the Fed movement. And as I said, I heard Dr. Ron Paul speak in the University of Houston. I did have a couple more questions for him. Unfortunately, his time was short. You guys out there, you gave me a number of great questions to ask. And the last one I wanted to ask, which we didn't get to, is his thoughts about the role of secret societies in our society in general. For those of you who follow my work, you know that I'm working on the final episode, the 16th episode of the Pyramid of Power documentary series, which you can find at thepyramidofpower.net. And in that documentary episode, we clearly show the influence of secret societies, whether you're talking about the Freemasons, Skull and Bones, the Bohemian Club at Bohemian Grove, and others. And I know there are people who are skeptical of Ron Paul and who believe he is a Freemason based on pictures of certain handshakes he's done, or because his father was a Freemason, or family members of his were involved in the Order of the Eastern Star. And I wanted to ask him about his thoughts about that. For example, why did JFK warn about secret oaths and secret societies? I would have loved to get Dr. Paul's thoughts on that. Maybe we will in the future. But nevertheless, thank you guys for all tuning in. I really do appreciate you. And as I said, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.